In the beginning, before the 9 worlds were forged and before time had taken shape, there was only the yawning void of Ginnungagap. From that infinite emptiness came fire and ice, light and darkness, life and death entwined in an eternal dance. It was in that churning chaos that Hel was born, a child of Loki, the trickster, and Angerboda, the giantess of the cursed lands. She was unlike any other, half-living, half-dead, a being whose very existence bridged the realms of the living and the dead. Her siblings, Fenrir, the wolf that would swallow the sun, and Jormungandr, the serpent that encircled the oceans, were creatures of destruction, feared by gods and mortals alike. Hel, however, was different. Her realm would not be one of fiery destruction or thunderous wrath. Her realm would be silence, inevitability, and the quiet eternity of those the world had forgotten. The All-Father, Odin, saw this child of shadow and foresaw the path she must walk. Loki's daughter, he said, his voice echoing through the halls of Asgard, shall not roam the lands of men. Her dominion will be over what is neither remembered nor celebrated. She shall rule the forgotten. And so she was cast into Niflheim, a world of ice and mist, where the rivers wept cold tears and the fog hung thick over frozen valleys. There she claimed her throne, shaping her kingdom from the echoes of mortality, crafting halls from shadow and silence. It was not a place of punishment, but of balance. The souls that came to her were not warriors of legend or heroes of song. They were the sick, the aged, the overlooked, and the lost. Her gaze pierced the veil between worlds, seeing all that had been and all that was yet to come. Mortals feared her, spoke her name only in whispers, and yet few truly understood her purpose. She was not the harbinger of cruelty. She was the keeper of inevitability. Death, in her hands, was not punishment. It was the final truth. The mortal world barely glimpsed her, yet those who did carried the memory like a shadow at the edge of consciousness. A lone traveler lost in the mists of Niflheim might glimpse her figure on the horizon, hear her soft, echoing voice whispering their name. They would feel neither malice nor warmth, only the certainty of what awaited all beings. She was patient, silent, and eternal, a witness to countless lives and the slow unraveling of time. Even the gods tread carefully when speaking of her. Loki, her father, whose mischief had brought both chaos and revelation to the worlds, regarded her with a mixture of pride and trepidation. Odin, the All-Father, knew that her existence was a necessary counterbalance, a reminder that life's beauty is inseparable from its end. Hel's realm was a reflection of cosmic order. The forgotten were not lost. They were preserved, and through their preservation, the living found the subtle truth of mortality. Legends grew in whispers, sailors who vanished in storm-tossed seas, wanderers who never returned from the forests, the aged who quietly faded from hearth and home. They were all said to dwell in Hel's halls. And though mortals feared her, few realized that she was not an agent of vengeance, but a sentinel of equilibrium. Her shadow was not darkness to be escaped, but a presence to be acknowledged, a constant reminder that every life, no matter how brief or unremarkable, mattered in the great tapestry of existence. Hel moved through her domain with a grace that was both haunting and inevitable. She did not speak unless necessary, yet her presence was a language unto itself. Souls arriving in her halls did not kneel, nor cry, nor plead. They simply waited, and she observed, guiding them gently into the stillness that all must eventually know. And though her visage might terrify, there was a strange comfort in her constancy. Life ends for all, yet in her realm, nothing is ever truly lost. In the deepest corners of Niflheim, where ice met shadow, Hel's voice would echo softly, not as a threat, but as a revelation. Live, remember, and fear not. For even in the shadow of inevitability, there is purpose. You are not gone. You are here, as all must be. And so, she remained, ever watchful, ever patient, the goddess of death who was never meant to be fully understood. She was the quiet truth behind the mortal world's fear, the unspoken knowledge that every soul would one day meet her gaze. The stories told of her by bards and scribes were fragmentary at best, for few dared to speak of the one who rules the unseen. Yet, in the silence of Niflheim, Hel's power was absolute, eternal, and uncompromising. A goddess of death who was never truly cruel, only inevitable. Even in the frost-bitten expanse of Niflheim, life, or what passed for it, stirred in the corners of her dominion. Shadows moved like silent tides over the frozen plains, and the icy rivers carried whispers of lives long ended. Hel's presence wove through these whispers like a thread, unseen yet undeniable. She did not hurry, for in her realm, time was a river without urgency, and every soul arrived in its own season. The gods seldom interfered in her domain, though curiosity occasionally brought them to her gates. Odin once ventured, hooded and solemn, to witness the daughter of Loki ruling over the forgotten. He found her seated upon a throne carved of ice and blackened bone, her half-dead visage both terrifying and mesmerizing. "You have shaped this realm with uncanny precision," Odin said, his voice echoing across the frozen court. "Even I cannot deny the order in the shadow you have crafted." Hel's gaze met his, and it was neither warm nor cold. It simply was. "I take only what is given," she replied, her voice as soft as a sigh and as final as the grave. "The souls arrive. I shape their waiting no more, no less. They are neither yours nor mine. They belong to what comes after life." Even Loki, her father, approached her domain with a mixture of awe and mischief subdued by respect. He lingered on the edge of her halls, observing the silent throngs of the departed. "You have turned what the gods feared into a kingdom that thrives on inevitability," he murmured. "It is remarkable." Hel's lips curved faintly, not a smile, but the acknowledgement of recognition. "I am not remarkable, I am necessary," she said, her voice drifting across the frozen expanse like the echo of a distant bell. "Without me, the living would forget what death truly is. And without forgetting, they cannot live fully." Mortals occasionally glimpsed her, though never in ways that allowed them to linger. A wandering hunter might glimpse her shadow among the pines, and in that moment, understand the fleeting fragility of life. Few could speak her name aloud without trembling, yet those who encountered her directly carried the knowledge of her existence like a hidden scar, a reminder that life and death were bound in ways mortals rarely comprehended. And it was not only the living who were shaped by her presence. Even the dead were transformed within her halls. Those who arrived frightened and confused often found themselves acclimating to the stillness, learning the rhythm of her domain. In Hel's silence, they discovered a strange clarity, life's struggles, its triumphs, and its failures reduced to their essence. Some wept, others raged, and a few simply sat in quiet reflection. Yet all were bound by the inevitability that Hel embodied. Legends of her cruelty were greatly exaggerated. She did not punish the souls under her care. There were no tortures devised by her hand, no fires to sear the flesh, no anguish beyond what each carried from their mortal existence. Each soul's existence was acknowledged, preserved in the cold embrace of her halls. Forgotten they might have been by the living, but in Hell's realm, they mattered. Every life, no matter how insignificant it seemed in Midgard, had its place, its memory, and its enduring shadow. Yet even Hell, eternal and patient, understood the weight of loneliness. Her domain, while ordered, was vast beyond reckoning, and the voices of the living rarely reached her halls. Only the occasional whisper, the faint vibration of mortal thought carried through the worlds, reminded her of the realm beyond the mists. And though she rarely expressed it, she sometimes wondered what it would be to walk among the living again, to feel the sun on her half-living face, to taste air that was not thick with the echo of death. But such longings were fleeting. Duty was all she knew, and inevitability demanded its due. Hell was not a creature of whim or desire. She was a force, an axis upon which the balance of life and death turned. She watched, waited, and guided, and through her stewardship, the cosmic order remained intact. It was said that during Ragnarok, when the worlds trembled and gods fell to chaos, Hel would claim her role fully. The dead would rise, the lines between the living and the lost blurred, and her domain would stretch to embrace all who passed beyond the mortal coil. Even then, she would not act with malice, for malice was foreign to her purpose. She would simply exist, as she always had, as she always would, and the dead would follow her into the waiting shadow, guided not by fear, but by the immutable truth that death is not the end. It is the bridge to what lies beyond. In this way, Hel endured, unchanging yet ever-present. She was a goddess of death, yes, but not the death that terrifies mortals in their fleeting moments of fear. She was the quiet inevitability, the shadow that teaches respect for life, the unseen force that balances the realms. Time in Niflheim was different from the ticking of mortal clocks. It was slower, yet infinite, a place where moments stretched into eternities and every sigh of the wind carried the weight of countless lives. Hel wandered her domain with measured grace, her half-living, half-dead form gliding across frozen plains, her eyes tracing the silhouettes of souls as they drifted through her halls. Each was a story, a memory, a fragment of existence that had been overlooked or abandoned, and each was precious in the silent calculus of her realm. Though the mortals feared her, some glimpsed her not as a figure of dread, but as a guide. A young woman, lost to sickness and despair, might find herself standing at the edge of a frozen lake, fog curling around her feet like spectral fingers. And there, as if drawn from the mist itself, Hel would appear, her gaze neither threatening nor comforting, but absolute. "Where am I?" the woman would whisper, her voice trembling like fragile glass. "You are where you must be," Hel replied softly, her tone carrying the weight of inevitability. "All lives end, yet all are remembered here. Do not fear what comes." The woman's fear would mingle with awe, a strange relief settling in her chest. For in Hel's presence, there was no deceit, no cruelty, only the raw truth of existence and its finality. She did not offer forgiveness, nor judgment. She offered recognition, an acknowledgement that every life, no matter how brief, mattered in the grand design of the cosmos. Even the most heroic of mortals, warriors sung of in the halls of Midgard, sometimes found themselves at the threshold of her realm when fate had claimed them in ways the battlefield could not. They arrived with questions, rage, or confusion, only to find the same unyielding balance. Hell did not coddle, nor did she condemn. She simply was, and in her presence, all pretensions fell away, leaving the essence of the soul exposed to the cold clarity of truth. Legends told in hushed voices by wandering skalds often portrayed her as monstrous, half-rotting, half-beautiful, and entirely terrifying. And yet, those who truly encountered her rarely spoke of horror. They spoke of inevitability, of awe, of the serene weight of death rendered visible. Hell's half-living face could inspire fear, yes, but also clarity. Mortals understood, in her gaze, that life's beauty was inseparable from its end, and that nothing could exist without its shadow. Her relationship with the gods remained complicated. Odin, for all his wisdom, respected her as he respected no other daughter of Loki. Thor, ever brash and fiery, rarely came close, though even he could feel the silent authority she carried. Loki himself visited sparingly, his curiosity tempered by caution, recognizing that Hell's domain was neither playground nor battlefield. It was a realm beyond the control of trickery or might. The living often misunderstand me, Hell whispered once to no one in particular, standing atop the cliffs where icy winds tore through her hair. They think I am cruel, yet I have done nothing but observe, preserve, and guide. They fear what they cannot see, yet fail to see that in my shadows there is purpose. Her voice carried through the fog and across frozen waters, reaching ears she knew were long gone from the mortal realm, and perhaps, somewhere, even touching the thoughts of the living who dared to dream of the unseen. She had no malice, no hunger for souls beyond what destiny demanded. She was an axis upon which life and death balanced, a presence both feared and necessary, eternal in her patience and absolute in her purpose. Each soul in her realm was a story, each a whisper of what had been. And yet, even in her vastness, she felt the weight of loneliness, the echo of a world beyond reach, the realm of the living where warmth, laughter, and light persisted without her. But her role was unyielding, and desire held no sway. She had become the quiet inevitability of existence, the embodiment of what all feared but could not escape. To err in her judgment was impossible, for judgment was not her duty, balance was. Every soul she received, every shadow she observed, contributed to the cosmic tapestry she safeguarded. In her, the universe found its silent, immutable witness. When the time came for Ragnarok, she would claim her place without hesitation. The dead would rise, the living would tremble, and the boundaries between realms would blur. Hell would walk among them, a presence unbroken by chaos, a reminder that death is not annihilation but continuation, an essential thread in the fabric of existence. She would be neither enemy nor ally, only the reflection of what must always come, inevitable and eternal. And so she endured, ruling over her silent halls with patience that spanned millennia. She was death given form, but not cruelty. She was the shadow that reminded the living of their fleeting moments, the stillness that preserved the lost. Few would ever know her truth. Fewer still would see her as anything but legend. Yet Hell existed, as she always had, as she always would, guiding, observing, and holding in her quiet hands the balance between life and the inevitable beyond. Time moved differently in Hell's domain, unmarked by the sun or moon, by seasons or storms. Occasionally, the wind would carry faint echoes from Midgard, distant laughter, cries, or songs that reminded Hel of the world she had never fully known. She felt them as one might feel a memory pressed against the skin, fleeting, untouchable, yet poignant. Mortals who stumbled near the edges of her realm, lost or dying, often sensed her presence before they saw her. Some mistook her for a mirage, a trick of the ice and fog, until her half-living eyes met theirs. She did not speak immediately, for her patience was boundless, her silence more telling than any words. A lost warrior might kneel, thinking she was a goddess of vengeance, but Hel offered no judgment. Her gaze was steady, neither condemning nor forgiving, only absolute. "You fear what you cannot understand," she would murmur, her voice carrying over frozen plains, soft as falling snow yet firm as the ice beneath their feet. "I am not cruelty, that I am certainty, and all who come here shall find their place, neither above nor below, but within the balance." Some souls arrived burdened with regrets, with anger, with grief. Hel did not attempt to soothe them, nor did she attempt to chastise. She observed, guiding them gently into the rhythm of her halls. Slowly, over what seemed like centuries, they learned that her silence was a language, her stillness a teacher. Here, in the presence of the inevitable, all pretenses fell away, and each soul confronted the essence of what it had been. Even the gods, though powerful and immortal, approached Hel with a mixture of reverence and caution. Thor, whose hammer could level mountains, knew to keep his distance. Loki, her father, visited intermittently, curiosity tempered by the knowledge that the daughter of shadows could neither be bargained with nor swayed by deceit. Yet despite her isolation, Hel was not without fascination for the mortal world. She observed it with a detached intensity, noting the fleeting joys, the struggles, the fragility of life. She understood that fear of death drove humans to extraordinary acts, love, heroism, sacrifice, but she also understood that this fear was shallow compared to the certainty of her domain. In death, all pretensions fell away, and what remained was pure essence. Occasionally, a mortal would linger in her gaze longer than others, their spirit unwilling to cross fully into the waiting shadow. Hel did not coerce, for coercion was meaningless in her realm. Instead, she would wait, patient as the glaciers that shaped the landscape of Niflheim, allowing the soul to recognize the inevitable. In time, all surrendered, drawn by the natural rhythm that Hel embodied. Her dominion was not cruel, yet it was unflinching. The lost, the forgotten, the overlooked, they were all welcome, yet none could escape the truth she represented. In this, she was not a monster, but a guardian, a sentinel of balance. The whispers of fear that traveled across the worlds were born from misunderstanding, from mortals' inability to grasp a force that did not act out of malice or mercy, but out of necessity. In the quiet moments, when Niflheim was empty save for drifting shadows, Hel sometimes reflected on the paradox of her existence. She was eternal, yet bound to a realm of impermanence. She was death, yet she preserved. She was feared, yet she saved by mere recognition. And in this tension, she found purpose. She was the axis around which the cycles of life and death revolved, the silent hand that ensured that neither chaos nor neglect could claim dominion over the dead. When Ragnarok approached, as the prophecies foretold, Hel would play her part fully. The boundaries between the living and the dead would dissolve, and the frozen halls of Niflheim would swell with the countless souls who had ever lived. Even then, she would act with the same unyielding balance. There would be no anger, no joy, no vengeance, only the inevitability she had always embodied. And through it all, she would remain eternal, patient, and absolute, a constant in the ever-shifting cosmos. The mortals who whispered her name seldom understood her fully, yet the memory of her lingered in their stories, songs, and dreams. She was the shadow behind every ending, the quiet echo in the halls of memory, the unseen force that reminded them that life is precious because it is finite. Hel was not merely a goddess of death. She was the final truth that all life, no matter how fleeting or grand, must meet, and in meeting her gaze, the dead found neither fear nor torment, but the clarity of existence itself. And so, she endured in her silence. The universe held its breath. In her gaze, the lost found purpose. In her presence, death was no longer a terror, but a natural, unalterable part of all things. There were those rare mortals who approached Niflheim unwillingly, drawn not by fate but by accident, lost in storms or wandering into places where the veil between worlds was thin. For them, Hel was both terrifying and fascinating. Her presence was immediate, overwhelming, yet it carried no aggression, only inevitability. A young man, dying from wounds received in battle, might stumble into the fog, only to see her form rising from the icy mists. Half of her face was beautiful, pale, and serene, the other half a haunting decay, a mirror of mortality itself. You are death," he would stammer, fear thick in his voice. "I am neither death nor life," Hel would reply, her tone calm and unyielding. "I am what waits beyond. All who arrive here find the same truth. Endings are not punishment, but inevitability." Some would fall to their knees, expecting wrath or torment, yet found none. Instead, there was clarity, a strange peace in the certainty of her words. She did not grant forgiveness, nor did she issue condemnation. She acknowledged only the reality of existence, the way every life culminates in her realm. Her halls were vast, stretching beyond the horizon, a frozen expanse dotted with icy spires and blackened towers of stone. Souls drifted through them silently, many bewildered at first, learning to move within the rhythm of this frozen kingdom. Over time, some began to comprehend the subtle patterns Hel had imposed, the way she organized, observed, and guided without interference, preserving the essence of each life. Odin, who had cast her into Niflheim, understood the necessity of her role. Thor, fiery and impulsive, seldom approached, yet even he felt the weight of her authority when he glimpsed her across the mists. Loki, her father, was perhaps the only one who approached her freely, though even he could not bend her will. Patient and inevitable, she does not act out of malice or mercy. She simply is, and all who enter her halls will be changed, whether they know it or not. Hel did not act alone. Her domain had its own life, a reflection of her essence. Frozen rivers whispered secrets to the dead, and blackened trees groaned softly under the weight of centuries. Shadows moved with purpose, guiding the newly arrived toward their proper place. Here, in the stillness of Niflheim, even the smallest detail mattered. Nothing was wasted, and every soul, no matter how small or forgotten, had its reflection in the grand tapestry of her realm. The mortals who survived their brief glimpses of her presence often carried the encounter as a memory unlike any other, a sense of something eternal and unfathomable, a truth beyond their comprehension. They would speak of her rarely, if at all, knowing that mere mention might summon fear in others. Hell existed in stories whispered at hearths, in vague hints of shadow and inevitability, yet very few could recount the full measure of her dominion.
And yet she watched, patient and eternal. Her purpose was constant, to maintain the balance, to observe, to guide. She neither rushed nor hesitated. Souls arrived, lived their brief time in her halls, and understood, in the silence that pervaded all, that this was their place. Neither punishment nor reward, but recognition. In her domain, death was not terror. It was clarity, a final mirror reflecting the truth of life itself. Even as Ragnarok approached, Hel remained unchanged, her dominion unwavering. She would not lead armies or fight battles, but when the worlds trembled and gods fell, she would embody the inevitability that all feared. The dead would rise, the boundaries between life and death would blur, and she would remain, guiding, observing, and preserving the balance. There would be no malice, no triumph, only the quiet certainty that endings are part of existence, and in this certainty, all life finds its measure. Hel endured, eternal and patient, the silent axis of life and death. She was feared, misunderstood, and seldom remembered by the living, yet her role was absolute. She was not cruelty made flesh, but inevitability given form. She watched over the forgotten, the forsaken, and the overlooked, and in doing so, preserved the delicate balance of the cosmos. To encounter her was to glimpse the truth behind life's fleeting beauty, that every ending matters, that every shadow is part of the whole, and that even in death there is meaning. And so in the silent expanse of Niflheim, Hel ruled, not as a tyrant, not as a savior, but as the eternal witness, the quiet truth, the goddess of death who was never meant to be fully understood. In her halls, life and death coexisted in delicate harmony, and in her gaze the lost found purpose, clarity, and recognition. She was Hel, daughter of Loki and Angerboda, queen of the forgotten, keeper of inevitability, and the story the world never fully told. Hel's domain was vast beyond measure, a frozen expanse of shadow and ice that stretched farther than the mortal eye could perceive. Within this cold eternity, every detail was alive with quiet purpose. The rivers of Niflheim carried whispers of lives long ended, and the blackened trees groaned with the weight of centuries, each leaf a memory preserved in the stillness. The wind itself seemed to listen, bending to the presence of the half-living goddess, carrying her words across the endless mists. Souls drifted through the halls and valleys of her kingdom like slow-moving currents, each guided by the invisible hand of inevitability. Some arrived bewildered, trembling with fear or confusion, while others seemed to accept their fate immediately, surrendering to the rhythm of a world where endings were not punishment, but recognition. Hel observed them all, her gaze steady, unflinching, yet not cruel. She was both judge and witness, a sentinel of the final truth. Occasionally, a mortal's memory would manifest in the icy fog, a fleeting glimpse of a loved one, a remembered moment of joy or sorrow, a fragment of a life left unfinished. Hel allowed these echoes, understanding that each was part of the delicate balance she maintained. She did not interfere, nor did she intervene. She simply allowed the memory to exist, a reflection of the life that had passed. And in doing so, she reminded the living and the dead alike that every act, every thought, every emotion mattered, even if forgotten by the world above. Legends whispered of her cruelty, but these were tales born of fear and misunderstanding. Hel did not revel in suffering. She did not twist the spirits under her care for her amusement. She guided them, preserved them, and in her quiet patience offered them a form of immortality. Their existence acknowledged, their essence held safe within her halls. Even the gods could not claim such authority over the dead. Odin, wise and far-seeing, had cast her into Niflheim, yet even he knew that her dominion was beyond the reach of Asgard's power. Thor, mighty and impulsive, respected the silence of her authority. Loki, her father, observed with cautious fascination, recognizing that she had become something neither god nor giant could influence, a force of balance, immutable and eternal. Mortals occasionally glimpsed her at the edges of their world, a dying warrior, a lost traveler, a sailor swept into a storm-tossed sea. Each might see her figure emerge from the mist, half shadow, half light, and understand instinctively that she was not to be feared in the usual sense. Her presence was not violent but absolute. It demanded acknowledgement. It reminded them, in ways words could not, that life was fleeting, fragile, and yet profoundly meaningful because it was finite. "You fear me," she whispered once to a soul trembling before her. "Yet fear is not what I inspire. I am the shape of inevitability, the reflection of all that passes. You cannot escape me, nor would you wish to, for in me you see what your life has been and what it must become." Even in the solitude of Niflheim, Hel's mind wandered, tracing the threads of the worlds beyond. She watched the living from her distant vantage, observing the small acts of courage, love, and defiance that defined their fleeting existence. She understood them in ways the living could not, for she had witnessed countless lives, each ending in her halls, each leaving its mark upon the tapestry of the cosmos. The living feared what they could not see, but Hel saw everything, and in her seeing, she preserved the balance that allowed existence itself to continue. Ragnarok loomed in the prophecies, an inevitable storm that would shake the foundations of the 9 worlds. Hel's role in it was not one of aggression or triumph, but of quiet authority. When the dead rose and the boundaries between life and death blurred, she would guide them with the same unflinching patience she had always shown. Her power was not destructive, it was fundamental. She ensured that the cycle endured, that the living and the dead remained part of the same cosmic rhythm. That balance was neither lost nor forgotten, and so Hel endured, an eternal presence in the frozen halls of Niflheim. She was feared, misunderstood, and seldom remembered by the living, yet she was indispensable. She was the axis upon which life and death turned, the silent witness to all that passed and the embodiment of inevitability itself. Mortals might whisper her name in fear, bards might sing fragmentary songs of her half-living form, but the truth of Hel was known only to those who had glimpsed her essence. That death is not an enemy, but a constant companion, a reflection of life's impermanence and a reminder that every shadow carries meaning.
Hel's story was never fully told, even among the gods. She was the quiet truth behind existence, the unseen presence that shaped all endings. And though her visage might terrify, her purpose was profound: to preserve, to guide, to witness, and to hold the balance of all things in the silent, eternal expanse of her domain. In her halls, the forgotten found purpose, and in her presence, all understood, at last, that death was not an end, but a necessary, immutable part of the universe. Time in Niflheim was eternal, yet it was not stagnant. Hel's realm shifted subtly, a reflection of the countless lives it contained. Frozen rivers twisted and flowed like veins of memory. Blackened forests stretched farther than the eye could see, and the fog seemed to breathe with its own rhythm. Within this vast, silent kingdom, Hel moved like a shadow of inevitability, her presence shaping everything without force, without hurry. Each soul carried its story: grief, regret, joy, and fleeting moments of triumph, and Hel observed them all with the same impartial gaze. She did not interfere, did not comfort, nor chastise. She merely acknowledged their presence and guided them into the flow of her realm. And in her acknowledgement, each soul discovered an unfamiliar clarity, a recognition of its place in the endless cycle of existence. Some mortals who wandered too close to Niflheim felt the pull of her domain before they even saw her. A ship caught in a violent storm, a hunter lost deep in the frozen forests, or a weary traveler collapsing from sickness might glimpse her silhouette emerging from the mist. Half of her face was untouched, pale and serene, the other half a haunting decay. Yet it was neither grotesque nor beautiful. It was absolute. "You do not belong here. Yet here you are," she would say, her voice soft as snow yet ringing with certainty. "All lives end. All paths lead to this moment. You are not punished. You are acknowledged." Fear often gave way to awe, confusion to understanding. In Hell's presence, mortals glimpsed a truth they had long ignored. Life's beauty and terror are inseparable, and death is not an enemy, but a mirror of existence itself. Even the most hardened warriors, those celebrated in the sagas of Midgard, found themselves humbled. Their weapons, their glory, their pride, they held no power here. Only their essence remained, examined and preserved in the cold clarity of her halls. The gods respected her domain, each in their own way. Odin approached with solemnity, knowing that even the All-Father could not bend her will. Thor, ever brash, understood the futility of challenging her. Loki, her father, visited intermittently, curiosity tempered by the knowledge that Hell's power was absolute. No trick, no threat, no plea could alter her function. She was neither benevolent nor malevolent. She was inevitability incarnate. Within her halls, the dead moved in a rhythm dictated by Hell alone. Some whispered their regrets into the icy wind. Others lingered in memories of Midgard, fragments of a life left unfinished. Hell allowed these echoes, for they were part of the tapestry she preserved. Every thought, every deed, every fleeting emotion had its place, and in her observation, nothing was wasted. She understood the fear of the living, for she had watched them from afar. They feared her as they feared the unknown, and yet, unknowingly, they revered her. Her presence reminded them that life is fragile, fleeting, and precious precisely because it is temporary. In this, she was not cruel but necessary, a teacher of the silent truths that mortals could scarcely comprehend. Even as the prophecies of Ragnarok whispered through the nine worlds, Hell remained steadfast. The dead would rise, boundaries would blur, and chaos would unfold. But she would be there, unyielding and patient. She would not fight, nor lead, nor conquer. She would guide, observe, and preserve. Her role was eternal, unchanging, and absolute, and so Hell endured. The mortals who whispered her name, the bards who feared to sing her full story, the gods who treated her with cautious respect, they all glimpsed only fragments of her truth. She was not vengeance, nor terror, nor mercy. She was balance, inevitability, and clarity given form. She was the guardian of the forgotten, the queen of Niflheim, the half-living, half-dead witness to all that passed. In her gaze, the lost found recognition. In her halls, the forgotten discovered purpose. And in her presence, all understood, at last, that death was not an end but a continuation, a necessary, immutable part of the grand design. Hell, daughter of Loki and Angerboda, reigned supreme in her silent, eternal kingdom, a goddess of death whose story was never fully told, yet whose truth shaped the cosmos itself. Hell's dominion was a kingdom of quiet inevitability, a place where time held little meaning and the dead moved with the slow rhythm of eternity. The fog clung to every surface, curling around jagged rocks and blackened trees, whispering memories of lives long ended. Rivers of ice carried the echoes of laughter, grief, and fleeting moments of triumph from Midgard, fragments of existence preserved in her realm. Souls wandered through this frozen expanse, some fearful, some resigned, some curious, yet all were bound to the same truth. Hell saw them as they were, stripped of pretense and illusion. She did not judge, she did not punish. She merely observed, guiding them into the flow of her domain, allowing each to find clarity in the stillness. To the living who glimpsed her from afar, she appeared monstrous, half decayed, half ethereal. But to the dead, she was a constant, a mirror of inevitability that brought understanding rather than terror. Mortals who crossed paths with her often sensed a strange calm amidst the fear. A warrior fallen on the battlefield, a child lost to illness, a wanderer swept into the mists. They would see her form rising from the fog, the half-living visage gazing steadily at them. "You fear me," she would say softly, her voice carrying over frozen plains, "and yet you should not. I am neither cruelty nor mercy. I am what awaits all who live. In me, your life is acknowledged and your story preserved." Her words struck with the weight of absolute truth. Even the bravest of souls trembled, yet many felt a strange relief, a recognition of the inevitability they had tried to ignore. Hell's domain demanded nothing beyond acknowledgement. She did not intervene in the affairs of the living except as destiny dictated. Her power lay in observation, in the patience of centuries, in the quiet understanding that every existence mattered in the grand design. The gods, for their part, treated her with cautious reverence. Odin, the All-Father, visited rarely, acknowledging the daughter of Loki's dominion as a necessary force beyond even his control. Thor, ever bold and impulsive, approached with care, wary of the unyielding authority she commanded. Loki, her father, studied her with fascination, knowing that his daughter had become something neither god nor giant could sway. She was balance incarnate, a force of inevitability that no trickery, no weapon, no plea could alter. Within the frozen halls of Niflheim, the dead drifted like slow-moving currents, learning to navigate the rhythm of her world. Some whispered regrets to the ice and fog. Others lingered in fragments of memory, reliving moments from lives left behind. Hell allowed these echoes to persist, knowing that each memory contributed to the tapestry of existence she preserved. And in this careful order, every life, no matter how brief or overlooked, had its place. Even as the prophecies of Ragnarok drew closer, Hell's role remained unchanged. When the dead would rise and the boundaries between life and death blurred, she would guide them with the same patient authority she had always exercised. In her presence, all things found balance. The mortals who whispered her name rarely understood her, and bards told only fragments of her story, fearful of speaking too fully of the half-living queen of the forgotten. Yet Hell's influence stretched beyond their understanding. She shaped the perception of life and death, teaching through observation and presence that every shadow carries meaning and every ending contributes to the whole. And so, Hell endured. Her gaze remained steady, her patience infinite, her purpose unyielding. She was the quiet truth of existence, the unseen axis upon which life and death turned, the eternal witness to all that passed. She preserved, she guided, she observed, and through her, the cosmos maintained its fragile, delicate balance. Hell was not vengeance incarnate, nor a tyrant of the dead. She was inevitability given form, the reflection of mortality, the guardian of what is forgotten yet essential. In her halls, the lost found recognition. In her gaze, clarity. In her presence, understanding. She was Hel, daughter of Loki and Angrboda, queen of Niflheim. The story never fully told, the truth never fully understood, yet indispensable to the order of all things. Hel's presence was never announced by thunder or flame. She did not arrive with the roar of battle or the crack of lightning like the gods of war and storm. Instead, she came as silence itself, a stillness so complete that even thought seemed to slow in her shadow. In Nibelheim, this silence was law. It shaped the way souls moved, the way memories surfaced, the way eternity settled into the bones of the dead. The newly arrived often struggled against it at first. They spoke aloud, cried out, called the names of loved ones who could no longer hear them. Their voices echoed briefly against frozen stone before dissolving into fog. Hell watched without interruption. She had learned long ago that resistance was part of understanding. Every soul fought the truth in its own way, and every soul eventually came to recognize that struggle was unnecessary. "You are not erased," she would say when the weight became too much, her voice soft but immovable. "You are not condemned, you are witnessed." Those words carried more power than comfort ever could. To be seen, truly seen, without judgment or expectation was something few had known in life. Titles meant nothing, wealth meant nothing. Even glory faded. What remained was essence, and that essence was preserved. There were no gilded halls, no thrones of splendor meant to inspire awe through excess. Her kingdom was vast but restrained, monumental yet stripped of indulgence. The dead did not compete here. They did not rise above one another. They simply existed, equal in their final truth. Hell herself was the embodiment of this balance. Half of her face bore the mark of life, pale and calm, almost gentle. The other half carried the undeniable truth of decay, not grotesque but honest, stripped of illusion. She did not hide it. Mortals recoiled from this duality because it reminded them of what they tried so desperately to forget, that life and death are not opposites, but companions. In rare moments, Hell stood at the farthest edges of her realm, where the fog thinned and the fabric between worlds grew fragile. From there, she could sense Midgard, the warmth of hearth fires, the clash of steel, the laughter of children, the quiet despair of those who believed themselves unseen. She felt it all without longing. Desire had no place in her purpose, but awareness did. She understood the living better than they understood themselves, because she saw how every story ended. The gods spoke of destiny as something written, something rigid and inescapable. Hell knew better. She had seen the variations, the near misses, the lives that bent and twisted in unexpected ways before arriving in her halls. Fate was not a straight path, it was a convergence, and she was where all paths met. Even Loki, her father, could not fully unravel her nature. His chaos had birthed her, but she was not chaos. She was order born from inevitability. Where he disrupted, she stabilized. Where he questioned, she confirmed. In this, she was perhaps the most honest force in all the 9 worlds. When Ragnarok finally came, as all prophecies insisted it would, Hell would not rage against the destruction. She would not celebrate it either. She would simply expand, her domain opening to receive what must come. Gods would fall, heroes would perish, worlds would burn, and Hell would remain, unchanged, her halls filling with the echoes of divinity and mortality alike. There would be no distinction then. Gods and mortals would stand equal before her gaze, stripped of power, stripped of legend, reduced to truth. And in that truth, Hell would do what she had always done: preserve, observe, and maintain the balance that even the gods depended upon but rarely acknowledged. This was why her story was never fully told, not because it lacked power, but because it lacked comfort. Hell did not promise salvation. She did not threaten damnation. She offered only certainty, and certainty frightened the living more than cruelty ever could. Yet without her, the cosmos would unravel. Without her silence, memory would rot. Without her patience, death would become chaos. Hell was not the end of life. She was the reason life had meaning at all. Because something ends, it matters. Because it fades, it is precious. Because it passes through her halls, it is remembered. And so she stood, eternal in the frozen mist, watching the endless procession of existence flow toward its final truth. Not as a monster, not as a tyrant, but as the quiet, unwavering axis upon which all things turned. Thinned or thickened not by hell's command, but by the acceptance of those who walked through it. The realm was not static, it was reflective. Every soul altered it slightly, leaving behind a faint imprint that joined countless others, layering memory upon memory until the land itself became a living archive of existence. Hell stood at the center of this archive, not as a ruler issuing decrees, but as a constant presence anchoring it all. She did not need to command obedience. Nothing here could rebel against what it already was. The dead did not fear her authority, they recognized it. And recognition, in her realm, was more powerful than force. The Valkyries, when they passed near her borders, felt it too. Though they served Odin and carried the honored dead to Valhalla, they knew that Hell's domain was not lesser, only different. Glory was a temporary distinction, inevitability was eternal. Even Valhalla would one day empty, its warriors marching toward a fate that led, eventually, back to her. Time would deliver the truth on her behalf. As the prophecies tightened their grip on the nine worlds, tremors rippled through existence itself. The dead stirred uneasily. The living dreamed of shadow and frost. Gods felt a tension they could not name. Hell alone remained unchanged. Ragnarok was not a threat to her. It was confirmation. When the first gods fell and the skies burned, her realm expanded not with violence, but with inevitability. The dead came in numbers unseen since the dawn of time. Heroes, kings, monsters, even gods. And Hell received them all with the same unwavering gaze. Here, Divinity offered no protection. Here, legend meant nothing. A god's soul carried no more weight than a farmer's, no more permanence than a child's. This was the final equality the cosmos resisted but could never escape. You stand where all things stand eventually, Hel would say, her voice echoing through halls now filled with the weight of myth itself. You are not fallen, you are complete. The universe did not end in chaos, that it ended in stillness. And in that stillness, Hel remained, witness to the closing of one cycle and the quiet preparation for the next. Even destruction bowed to inevitability. When the worlds began anew, as cycles always demanded, Hel did not vanish. Death did not disappear simply because life returned. She endured, reshaped but unbroken, her realm once again filling slowly, patiently, as new lives ran their course. This was the truth never spoken aloud. Death was not an interruption of existence, it was its foundation. And Hel was not a villain in the story of the gods. She was its anchor. Without her, memory would dissolve. Without her, endings would lose meaning. Without her, life itself would become weightless, endless, and ultimately meaningless. So she waited, as she always had, her kingdom breathing softly in the frozen mist, her gaze steady across eternity. Mortals would continue to fear her. Gods would continue to underestimate her. Stories would continue to distort her image into something monstrous. But Hel did not need worship. She did not need love. She did not even need understanding. She needed only to remain. And she did, eternal, inevitable, unbroken. Long after the echoes of Ragnarok faded and the cosmos began its slow, deliberate reconstruction, Hel remained. Where fire had devoured realms and oceans had swallowed continents, she stood unchanged, untouched by ruin or rebirth. Destruction did not diminish her, just as creation did not empower her. She was not bound to either. She existed between them, the quiet constant that allowed both to matter. As new worlds took shape and new lives emerged, Hel watched without anticipation or regret. She had seen beginnings countless times before, each one fragile, luminous, and doomed by its own necessity. Life always returned, and with it, fear of her name. Mortals whispered of death as if speaking it aloud might summon her, as if silence itself were a shield. They prayed to gods of harvest, war, love, and storms, but rarely to her. She required no devotion. She would find them all regardless. In this, Hel was unlike any other deity. The others depended on belief, offerings, remembrance. Hel depended on nothing. Faith did not strengthen her. Fear did not weaken her. She was not sustained by mortals, nor diminished by their forgetfulness. Even if her name were erased from every story, every rune, every memory, she would still be there when the final breath was drawn. That was her power, not dominion, but certainty. In the quiet ages that followed, her halls filled slowly once more. The dead arrived not in waves, but in steady rhythm, as life resumed its fragile dance. New souls carried new questions, shaped by different worlds, different beliefs, different understandings of what awaited them. Some expected paradise, others expected torment. All were met with the same unyielding truth. This is not reward, Hel would say, her voice calm and without cruelty. And this is not punishment. This is the end of movement, the place where becoming stops. For many, that realization was terrifying. For others, it was liberating. To no longer strive, to no longer fear failure, to no longer chase meaning that always seemed just out of reach. There was a strange mercy in stillness. Hell did not grant that mercy intentionally. It emerged naturally from what she was. Her realm continued to evolve, shaped not by her will, but by accumulation. Every life added depth to Niflheim, every ending another layer of memory embedded into ice and stone. The land itself became dense with existence, heavy with the weight of countless stories pressing gently against one another. It was not suffering that defined her kingdom, it was gravity. Even the gods, reborn or reshaped in later cycles, never fully escaped her shadow. They lived longer, shone brighter, wielded power beyond mortal comprehension, yet they too felt the pull of inevitability. Immortality was never absolute, it was only delay, and hell waited patiently for what delay could never prevent. Some gods resented her for this, others feared her. A few, in rare moments of clarity, respected her, but none could deny her. She did not walk among the living to remind them of her existence. She did not need to. Every funeral, every fading heartbeat, every quiet moment when a mortal realized their own fragility, that was her presence. She existed in the pause after loss, in the silence where someone once stood, in the weight that settled when a story ended. This was why she was misunderstood. Mortals wanted death to be dramatic, meaningful in a way that justified fear or worship. They wanted villains and saviors. Hell was neither. She was honest. And honesty, stripped of narrative comfort, was unbearable to most. So they twisted her image. They made her cruel. They made her monstrous. They painted her as a tyrant of suffering rather than a keeper of balance. It was easier to fear a monster than to accept an inevitability. Hell did not correct them. She had never corrected anyone. Time would do that for her. And time, like hell, never failed. Not with frustration, not with sorrow, but with a distant curiosity. Mortals built entire philosophies around avoiding her, entire religions around escaping her grasp. They chased immortality in stone, in bloodlines, in memory, believing that to be remembered was to be spared. Hell knew the truth they could not yet face. Remembrance was not escape. It was simply another form of arrival. Every name spoken after death eventually faded. Every monument crumbled. Every story eroded beneath time's relentless passage. And when those remnants finally dissolved, the soul remained exactly where it had always been, within her keeping. Memory did not define existence. Ending did. Hell had watched civilizations rise convinced they had conquered death, only to vanish into silence centuries later. She had watched empires burn while their rulers screamed defiance into the void, only to stand quietly in her halls moments later, stripped of arrogance and illusion. She had watched the meek arrive gently, burdened only by exhaustion, and the powerful arrive shattered by the realization that power had never been protection. In her presence, there was no negotiation. Not because she refused mercy, but because mercy implied choice and inevitability allowed none. This was the distinction mortals failed to grasp. Hell did not take lives. She did not hunt souls. She did not claim the dead. She received them. And like the sea, she did not argue with the rivers. Some souls lingered longer than others in unrest. These were not the wicked, nor the virtuous, but the unfinished. Those who had lived without reflection, without pause, without ever truly seeing themselves. In life, distraction had shielded them from truth. In death, there was nowhere left to look but inward. Hell did not force that reckoning. She allowed it. Silence was her instrument. Stillness was her lesson, and inevitability was her authority. Completion did not mean peace, it meant understanding. To see one's life whole, without distortion, without justification, without denial. To recognize both beauty and failure as equal truths. That knowledge was heavier than suffering. And yet, it was also freeing. Hell watched this process endlessly, not with satisfaction, not with cruelty, but with precision. Her role was not emotional. It was structural. Without her, existence would fracture under the weight of unresolved endings. Without her, life would spill endlessly forward, collapsing under its own momentum. She was the boundary that gave shape to meaning. And boundaries, though feared, are what make form possible. In the ages that followed rebirth, mortals continued to tell stories of hell as a villain lurking beneath the world, a queen of rot and despair. They imagined her delighting in decay, feeding on sorrow. The truth was far more unsettling. She felt nothing toward suffering, and everything toward balance. Suffering ended in her halls. Pain required time, and time did not function here as it did among the living. Grief dissolved not through comfort, but through stillness. Anger burned itself out without fuel. Fear had no future to project itself into. What remained was essence, always essence. Hell's gaze rested upon it all, unwavering. She did not need to be loved. She did not need to be feared. She did not even need to be known. She only needed to exist, and she always would. In the deepest layers of her realm, far beyond where newly arrived souls drifted in confusion, Hell kept no throne, no sanctuary, no private refuge. There was no place she retreated to escape the weight of eternity. She stood within it always. To rule death was not to stand above it, but to be inseparable from it. This was the burden no other god could bear for long. The gods of light burned themselves out. The gods of war drowned in blood. The gods of wisdom fractured beneath their own questions. Hell endured because she did not strive. She did not conquer. She did not seek transcendence. She accepted the shape of reality exactly as it was. That acceptance made her terrifying. They believed a god must rage, love, hunger, or suffer to matter. Hell did none of these things, and yet nothing in existence escaped her gravity. She was not dramatic enough for worship, not cruel enough for hatred, not comforting enough for prayer. So she became myth instead of truth. Stories painted her as something simpler, something easier to fear. A monster. A demon. A queen of decay. Anything but what she truly was. The end that made beginnings meaningful. Hell watched mortals cling to the illusion that death could be negotiated with. They searched for loopholes in fate. They whispered prayers into darkness, hoping something, anything, might listen and intervene. Hell always listened. She never intervened. Intervention would have broken the balance. Every exception would have weakened meaning. Every spared life would have hollowed the value of all others. Equality in death was not cruelty. It was justice stripped of bias. The cosmos required it, even if the living could not accept it. This was why hell was never celebrated. Celebration required hope. She offered certainty. And certainty frightened the living more than despair ever could. Yet certainty was also the greatest gift existence possessed. Because if all things ended, then all things mattered. A single moment of kindness mattered. A single act of courage mattered. A single life, lived quietly and forgotten by history, mattered. Not because it echoed forever, but because it did not. Hell was the proof that nothing was wasted simply because it ended. She preserved no rewards. She inflicted no punishments. She held the truth, and the truth held everything together. When the last echoes of a life finally settled into her realm, when memory dissolved completely, and even the soul ceased its struggle to define itself, hell did not erase it. She absorbed it, not as power, not as sustenance, but as weight, another thread reinforcing the structure of reality itself. This was her final function, not to end life, but to anchor existence. Without her, reality would drift endlessly, untethered, collapsing under infinite continuation. Endings were not flaws in creation. They were its foundation, and hell was their keeper. She watched the procession of existence flow toward her without resistance, without judgment, without pause. She did not demand acknowledgement. She did not seek understanding. She waited, and everything came. There came a point in every cycle when the dead no longer arrived in confusion or fear, but in quiet resignation. These were the ones who had sensed hell long before they reached her halls. The elderly who had watched the world move on without them. The weary who had outlived their purpose. The broken who understood that survival alone was not living. They crossed into Niflheim not as trespassers, but as those who had finally stopped running. Hell recognized them immediately, not because they were virtuous or wise or worthy by mortal standards, but because they had already accepted what others resisted. Their transition was almost gentle. No struggle in denial, just the quiet acknowledgement that the path had ended. "You have already arrived," she would say, her voice barely disturbing the mist. These souls did not ask questions. They did not plead. They stood in her presence and felt something unfamiliar. Completion without reward, rest without promise. For them, death was not terror. It was release from momentum. Hell understood this state better than any god ever could. She had never known growth or decay the way mortals did. She had never chased meaning. She had never feared losing it. And yet, she comprehended exhaustion in its purest form, not physical, but existential. The weariness of having been something, of having mattered, of having carried the weight of becoming. This was why her realm was cold, not as punishment, but as stillness. Heat was movement, cold was rest. In the frozen quiet of Niflheim, nothing demanded more than it already was. Souls were not asked to improve, redeem, or evolve. They were allowed to stop. This was the mercy no one spoke of. The gods never acknowledged it because gods were terrified of stillness. They thrived on motion, conflict, worship, and narrative. Without struggle, they unraveled. Without relevance, they faded. Hell never faded. She was not sustained by belief. She was sustained by necessity. As long as something lived, something would end. And as long as something ended, she would remain. This truth echoed through her halls like a low, constant resonance. Not a sound, but a certainty embedded into existence itself. Every soul felt it eventually. Some resisted until the last fragment of will dissolved. Others surrendered quickly, finding relief in the absence of expectation. Hell did not hurry them. Eternity made haste meaningless. In distant realms, new myths were born. Mortals reshaped old gods into gentler forms, harsher forms, versions that fit their fears and hopes. Hell's image twisted with each retelling, sometimes a devourer, sometimes a jailer, sometimes a queen of torment. None of it reached her. Stories had no power here. Only endings did, and endings were honest. This was the truth hidden beneath every fear of death. Not that something waited to judge, but that nothing waited to explain. Meaning was not assigned afterward. It was forged in life, validated only by the fact that it ended. Hell was not the author of those meanings. She was their final punctuation. And punctuation, though small, determined everything. So she waited, as she always had, her realm breathing slowly with the accumulated weight of existence. The mist curled around her unmoving form. The dead drifted. The cosmos continued its endless cycle of emergence and collapse. And through it all, Hell remained unchanged. Not because she could not change, but because she did not need to. There were no clocks in Hell's realm, no markers of passing ages. Yet she felt the slow accumulation of existence like pressure deep beneath the ice. Every soul that arrived added weight, not burden, not strain, but density. Reality itself leaned on her domain, trusting it to hold what could no longer move forward. This was the role no other power could fulfill. Creation was loud, destruction was violent, balance was silent, hell was silence perfected. She did not stand apart from the dead as a ruler surveying subjects. She stood among them as the fixed point around which they oriented themselves. Souls did not bow to her. Like iron filings drawn toward a magnetic center, they adjusted naturally to her presence, finding their place without instruction. This was why rebellion did not exist in Niflheim. Nothing rebelled against gravity. Hell knew the truth they resisted. Nothing was stolen. Everything was returned to stillness, returned to completeness, returned to the state before striving fractured it into motion. Life was the deviation, death was the correction, not a punishment, an equilibrium. Hell never spoke this truth aloud to the living, because it would have broken them. To understand it too early was to lose momentum, and momentum was necessary for life to burn brightly, however briefly. Fear of ending kept them loving, building, fighting, hoping. She allowed the fear to exist that it served its purpose. In this way, even misunderstanding had meaning. Hell was not offended by misrepresentation. Monsters had their place in stories. Villains gave structure to fear. Simplicity allowed survival. Truth was too heavy for the living to carry without collapsing beneath it. Only the dead could bear it. And even then, only in time. This was why hell did not greet new arrivals with explanation. Understanding could not be forced. It emerged slowly, like frost spreading across stone, inevitable and irreversible. Each soul arrived fractured by life and left whole in stillness. Completion did not feel triumphant, it felt quiet. The gods, in all their brilliance and power, never achieved this state. They burned too hot, too fast. They resisted endings until endings broke them. Mortals, fragile and fleeting, reached acceptance more often, usually at the very end. Hell noticed this. She never judged it. She simply observed, and observation was enough. When the last fragments of resistance finally dissolved from a soul, something subtle occurred. Not disappearance, not erasure. Integration. The essence of that life settled fully into the structure of her realm, no longer separate, no longer struggling to be remembered. This was the final rest. Not sleep, not oblivion. Half of her reflected what had lived. Half reflected what had ended. She was not death as mortals imagined it. She was the reason death mattered. And as long as something lived, anything at all, she would wait. Unmoving, unyielding, unnecessary to worship, impossible to escape. In the end, if such a word could ever truly apply, hell understood something the living never could while breath still filled their lungs. Existence was not defined by what it achieved, but by what it released. Life clung, death let go. And letting go was not weakness, it was completion. She had watched the cosmos exhaust itself countless times. Worlds bloomed, decayed, and collapsed beneath the weight of their own complexity. Even gods, draped in eternity, eventually fractured beneath cycles they could not escape. Through it all, hell never changed her posture. She did not brace for endings. She was the ending, not as annihilation, but as resolution. This was the truth hidden beneath every fear, every prayer, every denial whispered into darkness. Mortals did not fear pain, or loss, or judgment. Not truly. They feared finality. They feared the moment when striving ceased and nothing waited to explain whether it had all meant anything. Hell offered no explanation, and in doing so, she offered something far more honest. Meaning was never assigned at the end. It was proven by the fact that the end arrived at all. A life mattered because it could not continue forever. Love mattered because it could be lost. Memory mattered because it faded. Every fragile, fleeting thing drew its value from the shadow hell cast across existence. She was not the enemy of life. She was its measure. This was why even silence bowed to her. In her realm, nothing demanded attention. Nothing cried out to be remembered. Nothing begged to be spared. The dead did not vanish. They settled. They became part of the structure that allowed everything else to exist without tearing itself apart. Hell did not consume them. She held them, not as possessions, as foundations. And so, when the last whisper of a soul finally dissolved into stillness, when even identity loosened its grip and faded into essence, hell did not move. She did not mark the moment. Eternity had no milestones. Completion required no acknowledgement. The cosmos simply became slightly more stable, slightly more balanced, slightly more whole. This was her legacy, the one never sung, never celebrated, never carved into stone. Heroes received songs, kings received monuments, gods received temples, hell received silence. And silence was fitting, because silence endured longer than anything else. Even now, as the living continue to fear her name, to twist her image into something monstrous and cruel, she remains unchanged. Fear does not diminish truth. Misunderstanding does not weaken necessity. Hell waits, she always has, until it isn't, and when it ends, she will be there. Not to judge, not to punish, not to comfort, but to receive, eternal, silent, necessary.